right, so our topic today is what would you do if disaster strikes? And the reason why we picked this topic today is because of the colossal cyber attack that is all over the news right now. And it's affecting hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of businesses. I'm not sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd have to go look at their report, but it's amazing how they're handling it. They obviously have, a plan in place in case something like this happens. So we're going to give you some tips on, what to do to prepare your business for when or if, hopefully if, but it does happen to a lot of people when disaster strikes. So our advice when we prepared our, we do have a disaster plan, and we were just talking about, our techs are actually doing a pretend like everything went down. This is what we're going to do.
Simulation.
Yeah, there's the word. I was saying play pretend. Simulation, that's the right word. Yep. Yay, Dave. Okay, so we actually have 4 little tips, on selecting who to work with. And, another thing that we thought of is the vendors you work with, the software providers that you work with your businesses. And some of it's niche specific, like dentists use certain software and healthcare providers use certain software. We use certain software, but we went through a process to select, who we work with. So that's what we're going to talk about.
So the first thing is this, what this boils down to in a lot of ways is an ounce of prevention. But it's more that you need to put more than an ounce of prevention into selecting your core processor, your line of business application. You need to look at a lot of different things here, a lot of different facets of this. And the 4 main ones that we brought up today are what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. So number 1 is, you know what this reminded me of, Dave? It reminded me of how you pick employees too. When you're doing a job interview, you kind of look at these same 4 things. So number 1 is experience. What kind of background does the company have? What kind of experience do they have in recovering customers? Or that was our case, but or go ahead.
How long have they been doing it? One story we had heard recently was a client who had changed their MSP service, and the new service came in, and the tech that they assigned to help with the migration had not worked on a production virtual server yet, and that could be kind of scary, to be a live production virtual server with somebody without too much experience coming in.
And you mean like they were, it was the service provider had never done that before? So it was like that customer was their sandbox? Is that what you're saying?
It sounded like they've done it before, but not in a production environment, not in a live, if something went wrong, that client could potentially have some hazards.
Yeah. Yeah, it's easy to miss stuff when you don't have the experience.
And you can be experienced in, in doing a certain thing for, hey, we've been doing this for 15 years, but now you're asking them to do something that they've only been doing for 6 months. So you need to kind of make sure you're, you're getting the correct experience.
Yeah. I feel like this leads to number 3. So I'm going to come back to number 2. Number 3, we were saying, ask the references and look at the customer reviews, whatever, but ask people who have done business with them, right? Ask people who have not doing business with them anymore, why, right? So both ends of the spectrum. And look for testimonials, right?
I think it goes back to the point you made earlier with the hiring. If you're looking to fill a position with somebody, you definitely want to know, more about them. And what a better way to find out than to contact their references or contact their past employment history and things like that.
Right.
And actually talk to them.
Mhm.
Don't just read their little testimonial, but go talk to them and ask them questions, you know, detailed questions, right? Okay, so now back to number 2, compliance. Now this is a word that gets tossed around in the IT industry a lot, but there are rules, you know, that a lot of companies have to follow, especially healthcare and financial, right? And like HIPAA is a prime example, right? They have to follow certain compliance and make sure that that service provider or that software provider can help you become
Protect.
compliant, right?
Right. And the basically, functionally, I would say the biggest part of all the compliance points are certainly HIPAA, your medical records, but any of your personal information, and then financial, obviously, again, protecting your personal information and your money. But
Yeah.
that's the you know, that's the function of why you're being, you know, compliant,
Not
follow
to
the rules.
toot our horn a little bit, but we just got a nice little comment from one of our financial customers that was like, oh, thank God we, you know, upgraded our security plan. They were
Right.
super happy that they were safe
With us.
with us.
With
And
us.
you know, I did want to make the point that any company can be hacked. So our point in this whole discussion is, you know, what do you do? Because it can happen, right? So that brings me to point number 4. Do you have a strategy in place, a backup strategy, in case your software goes down, your computers go down, your phones go down, right?
Right. And
That's-
and we discussed this in our morning meeting. You know, we let off this section here, the segment here, with the cyber attack that happened with a large company. But it doesn't have to be a cyber attack. It can be a natural disaster, a flood or a fire, or look in Texas last year where they had no power for you know, days and maybe weeks. So it's not just cyber attacks. Why you need data backup and you need like plans in place, etc. So you have to think a little broader with your backups, because that's your best protection, is a good backup against any disaster, whether it's malicious or just a natural disaster.
Yeah. You have words on that, Aaron? I
Yeah.
know last week we did talk about how some of the IP phones, you know, they have locations all across the country. So
With today's technology, I don't want to say it makes it simple for us to do the backuping process, but there is a number of alternatives or options available, including cloud-based options. Similar to last week's conversation about the geo-redundancy of some of these service providers, that becomes a viable option with your data backup. I think, though, to the bigger point, and to kind of put it back into context for, you know, what would happen today if DS Tech or our clients kind of experienced some of this cyber attack. Really having that conversation is that first step, just kind of understanding what it could mean, and then to sort of plot down, and it could just be scratches on paper, or it could be a full-blown plan. What would need to be done, and what priority those need to be done in order to sort of get back into that functioning mode again. And this stuff is serious, and we don't mean to deflate it by any means, because attacks like what we just saw with Kaseya on the global international level halt businesses. They stop businesses dead in their tracks.
yeah, and depending on what kind of plan you have, as my little example, it was a store I went into. Their computers were down, so they literally wouldn't sell me the little item when I went to the counter. I was like, okay, but couldn't you have just a pad of receipts that you could actually write an old-fashioned receipt for me, you know, or even take credit cards with those old-fashioned machines that the carbon copy or something, right? Have a backup plan.
Yeah.
Another example, I was in a grocery store that was having, they had an issue and they were restocking all the refrigerated items like as I spoke. They never shut down their doors, but obviously they had supplies or some kind of plan in place to replace inventory and keep going, you know. So it's good. And now that you bring up Kaseya, obviously they had a plan too, because if you go look at their site, they're telling you every single day what they're doing, what the steps are that they're doing to recover from this and to protect their clients. So,
and from my personal experience, and I mentioned that in our meeting this morning, they had a fix for this. There was a leak, there was a hole, a vulnerability in their software, and they were working on a patch for them for that vulnerability, and someone got wind of it and decided to attack them through it. So,
oh, wow.
yeah, so you can't stress enough in this business how keeping everything up to date is so important.
Yeah, that's the day of.
Yep.
Right?
And
It
yep.
could be hours.
And going back through my career, thinking back about 18 or 19 years ago, there was a vulnerability in Internet Explorer, when that was basically what everybody used to surf the internet, where your computer ran fine until you went online on Internet Explorer, and it shut down in 30 seconds. It shut your computer off. Well, Microsoft had fixed that patch and had it out there, like I want to say 7 or 8 months earlier, before the people started pushing this out. If you might remember this, Ginny.
I do remember this. I remember.
So we had customers come in, and I burned this fix to dozens of CDs and gave them to our customers and said, here, you know, this is what you need to do.
This is what you got to do. Yeah.
Fix it. But the other part is you're not updating your, you know, your Windows. Shame on you. And this is why you got this problem. So that's another part of, you know, of course, our security plans, where we manage your updates, we push them out, we patch your systems.
Yeah.
You know, so that can't be, you know, that's also a huge part of being secure.
Oh, didn't Eric have a story about a healthcare provider that lost everything and they didn't know what appointments were coming in for like a month, something like that. So they literally would open their doors and sit there and wait for people to come in. Oh, you have an appointment. It's like, so maybe print off your calendars, right?
Well, what's scary too, or you know, to sort of, you know, put a little more context on all this too, and something we talked about this morning is, you know, people can easily say, oh, it's not going to happen to me, or, oh, geez, I've got DS Tech as my MSP service provider, I'm okay. I mean, it's supply chain type stuff. I mean, what happens if there's cyber attack way up the chain and it trickles all the way down, and you're like, oh, it's not going to happen to me. It could drastically affect things that you do day to day. You know, general awareness.
We had a customer who's now a customer of ours, but was not previously. Their main line of business software that they ran their whole business on, that company was hacked. That they received literally a virus, for all practical purposes, as an update from their line of business provider, and installed this vulnerability, this malware on their computers. Fortunately, the lady who did their backup pulled the USB thing that they backed up their data to out of her computer and left it on her desk. So that couldn't be compromised either. But through no fault of their own, we went in there and spent many hours cleaning up their systems, and they're now a full MSP customer of ours. So you don't have to even be, you know, you can take all the precautions in the world.
Yeah.
But you can't account for everybody else.
No, so that's why you have a disaster recovery plan.
Exactly.
So, Awesome. Good stuff, guys. So make sure you get on our newsletter, dstech.net, and then you just hit the little news guy. Drag it down and hit news, and you can get on our newsletter so you don't miss anything. We are going to be having a Q&A. I believe, I'm hoping nobody answered yet. I just scheduled it for next week. We're going to have special guests to answer your questions specifically on this cybersecurity attack and on what you can do for your business. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jan.
All right. Thank you.